perfect storm for the nightmare to occur, and probably again.
Because Georgia law doesn't allow you to sue your employer for wrongful death, Bell's widow is going after SK Battery itself. The lawsuit accuses SK of committing a long list of safety violations, including failing to create and or enforce safety rules and guidelines. In its response, SK wrote, "The negligence of Cameron Bell is the sole cause of some or all the damages alleged by plaintiff in this action."
Is it possible that what happened to your husband will cause people there at the plant to perhaps focus more on safety if they weren't before?
I would hope so. But considering this isn't the first fall, I don't know that it will. He had been at other jobs for years and never had an incident. And here he can't even complete a month without dying.
In Commerce, Randy Travis, Fox 5 News.
Sagewood Fire Tavern and Chevron. Police say the individuals that sold alcohol to minors were cited and released.
They came up. Shakevious Young in the head. What did she do to deserve that? What did she do? These are pictures of the bullet holes from 21-year-old Shakevious Young's car following last week's shooting. Larry Brown says he's hurt and angry as he struggles to cope with the senseless murder of his youngest daughter.
There's a lot of tears and crying and moaning and groaning. I'm going to get some therapy. I am, because I did not know you could literally get as sad as I got yesterday.
DeKalb County police tell us the 21-year-old was shot just before midnight Thursday on the northbound side of I-285 near Church Street.
So we flew down there, seen her. Just horrible, man. Like, just, you know, because the bullet went through her frontal lobe. Like, this is not anything you want to ever see for anybody, let alone your own child.
Young died from her injuries 2 days ago. Sadly, this type of violence isn't unusual. We've told you of numerous shootings, some deadly, on Metro Atlanta highways this year.
Trump-based. No, that's the vast majority of the party. But they've also got to bring back some of the former Republicans who've drifted away in the last couple of years. Barron talks a lot about the disaffected Republican women, and he's right. But it's beyond women. There's also a lot of suburban men that would fit that category. We got to get them back, and the crime issue is one that will reach them, as is the overspending that we're seeing in Washington, the border crisis. These are making Democrats look bad. These are making the middle realize the dangers and the problems with Democrat control, and that's going to be a huge opening for Republicans in Georgia, the battleground of the entire nation.
Farron, is this an opening? As Brian
I think the one thing that Brian and Martha don't want our viewers to know, and that is that I think that the governor's interview with Claire Sims, Lori, was sort of a prelude of him sort of positioning himself to go into that convention. He wanted to try to throw some red meat to the Trump base. But how can we forget that the former president of the United States of America, besides targeting Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, enemy number 1/2 was Governor Brian Kemp. And so I don't think that this convention is going to go as well as Brian and Martha want us to believe. There are different factions within the Republican Party, many of whom that feel that the governor and other leaders did not do enough to quote-unquote stop the steal when it was all this very baseless and not factual evidence that was not presented during this election. And I think the last thing is when the governor says we need to protect the vote and make it harder to cheat, make it easier for people to vote and harder to cheat, I'm still waiting to this day, and I know Kathy agrees with me, where is the evidence of the fraud? Where is the evidence of the cheating that Republicans allege went on in the state? And so I don't think that the governor is going to walk out of there just cozy and just with ease. I do think you're going to see some Trump supporters hold him accountable.
Guns. And look, at this juncture, this is a very powerful message for Republicans going into 2022, Lori, is Democrats want to take away your last line of defense. The police aren't going toward violent crime anymore because they've been demonized, because they get blamed when violent crime leads to problems when police are around. And so they're going to back off. Guns are a way for Americans to defend themselves in their cars and in their homes and to protect their families. And until police can do something about the violence, that's a very strong message.
Kathy, 30 seconds there. I saw your hand up.
Well, I just want to be really, really clear that in New York and Chicago, the illegal guns that are flowing into those two states are from Georgia. And that's as a result of the laws or the lack of laws that we have in the state that regulate people's ability to get their hands on those guns.
All right, I want to move on because in an interview with
And if they have those guns illegally, that makes my point.
All right, thanks, you too. In an interview with the agent
criminals inside of Russia. It all raises this bigger question, and an uncomfortable one. Is this all a plan of Vladimir Putin's to test our new president, Joe Biden? And we're going to find out how the president decides to respond when he meets with Putin one-on-one 10 days from now in Geneva. Ultimately, does our high-tech society leave us uniquely vulnerable to attacks like this, unable to discourage a criminal enterprise shielded by one of our chief adversaries at the cost of trillions to American businesses and consumers?
It's almost like your house getting broken into. You know, there's a sense of security that you lose.
Last week, it was the world's largest beef supplier. A month ago, Colonial Pipeline, supplying roughly 45% of the East Coast fuel, paid a $4.4 million ransom to Russian hackers in Bitcoin after they accessed its system with a compromised password.
Our Justice Department has launched a new task force dedicated to prosecuting ransomware hackers to the full extent of the law.
Ransomware attacks have become routine, hitting everything from groceries to gas, hospitals to transportation to local government.
The largest public transit authority in the United States has fallen victim to a cyber attack.
Headaches for the steamship authority continue today following a ransomware attack.
UF Health is the target of a ransomware attack.
The FBI confirms to NBC News it is investigating 100 different types of ransomware, each responsible for multiple attacks in the U.S., many originating from Russia. It's a challenge director Christopher Wray compares to 9/11.
We're one step away from cities being plunged into darkness, and that is not fear and uncertainty. That's based on facts.
You could take down our electric grid, our transportation, our financial systems. You could virtually paralyze the country.
The Justice Department signaled in a memo on Thursday it plans to treat ransomware cases with the same priority as terrorism cases, centralizing internal tracking of investigations and prosecutions.
The criminal groups that fuel many of these attacks, including some of the recent ransomware attacks that we've seen, come from groups that have links to Russia. We cannot give any quarter, and no country should be harboring criminal actors of any type.
How will the U.S. respond? Back in 2016, after Russian interference in the election?
Why haven't we sent a message yet to Putin?
We're sending a message. We have the capacity to do it, and the message
He'll
we
know
sent, he'll know it, and it'll be at the time of our choosing and under the circumstances that have the greatest impact.
Now, ahead of a June 16th summit with Putin, the Biden administration is considering offensive cyber operations against hackers inside of Russia.
Mr. President, will you retaliate against Russia for this latest ransomware attack?
We're looking closely at that issue.
The president's message will be that responsible states do not harbor ransomware criminals, and responsible countries must take decisive action against these ransomware networks.
On Friday, Putin called the allegations nonsense and decided to escalate the back and forth by expressing sympathy for the January 6th insurrectionists.
Congress, but these were not just plunderers or robbers. They came with political demands.
And joining me now is Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia. He's, of course, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Warner, welcome back to Meet the Press. The FBI director, Christopher Wray, in a Wall Street Journal interview, essentially invoked 9/11 in sort of how to deal with these asymmetrical groups, these cells. Well, we called them terrorist cells in 2001 and 2002. Are these cyber criminals terrorists?
Disrupt some of this behavior. I think on Putin, it is important for us to continue to send a strong signal. By the way, the sanctions that were put in place by this administration and the previous administration, those are working. They are starting to take a bite out of long-term economic growth in Russia. So that's the right course. We have to continue that regime. That sanctions regime is very important. But I do think it's important for the president as well to send a very strong signal to Putin that to the extent that he understands this activity is going on, which I think he certainly does, the United States will not tolerate it and will continue to put pressure on the Russian economy up to and including additional sanctions on the central bank as well as on elements of Putin's government.
You know, Kimberly, this feels like one of these. Here we have this national security challenge. That's one of these challenges that actually impacts our data, suddenly is starting to impact our day-to-day lives. And I equated it, if you live in a city and there's a crime wave, you go to the mayor and the police commissioner, you're like, you do something about this. And that sort of was my feeling, like, okay, guys, do something about this. But I get a sense that everybody is looking for the handcuffs and not the solution.
I think that is right, and I think we are
against Moscow and its ransomware allies in this case. But here at home, it's going to be a lot like COVID, our COVID response. We have to use public and private. And clearly what we have to do is do what we did after 9/11, which was to build a good defense system. We upgraded our air traffic control systems after 9/11 to keep track of airplanes that might be hijacked. We want to know anybody who's off course. In this case, we have to have business work together to put the dots on the screen, like on an air traffic controller screen. Where is there people, ransomware people, trying to get at our companies? Where are they trying to hold us up? You got to report it in real time. In many ways, that's like a police case where you've got a kidnapping in progress, and you have to know when it's happening, and you have to go to the police. So I think it's a combination of warning the Russians. But, you know, I keep looking at that guy Putin, Chuck, and I look him in the eyes when you show a picture of him and he says nonsense, and I say, we can't read that guy like we read normal human beings. This guy is a KGB officer. He and Biden grew up in the Cold War. They know what this game's about. It's using other forces like the Russians used to use countries' wars of national liberation, where they're giving them all the guns to fight us. We're distracted by them, where they're pretending a little bit to be innocent. I look at those eyes of Putin, and when I look into his eyes, I see the Cold War coming back as a cyber war.
And Garen, it comes back to what posture do they want Americans to view Joe Biden as having when he confronts Putin? I mean, you know, do they want to be seen as aggressively confronting Putin, and do they have an idea what that looks like?
Well, I think the answer to the first is yes. They do want, the White House does want to position the president for a pretty forceful interaction with Putin, or they wouldn't be having this summit now. I mean, this was a choice, and Biden invited Putin to do it. So, I mean, he is saying very affirmatively here that he wants to talk.
But it goes on. It's a saying we've heard all too often, but for Vicki Barnes, who lives in the Continental Colony community in Southwest Atlanta, she and her neighbors apparently have to deal with it day in and day out. We hear it constantly, I mean, to the point where we just lay in the bed and be like, okay, they out there shooting again, and we just kind of ignore it now. I mean, it happens, so we just ignore it. She said sadly hearing gunfire comes as no surprise, but hearing a toddler was shot overnight breaks her heart. Somebody out here just doing what they do, just cutting up and acting a fool, and a child, 2-year-old child, has been damaged from it, and it's a shame. According to the incident report, the shooting happened just before 3 in the morning. A man had returned home after dropping off his pregnant wife at the hospital with complications. He told police he was walking ahead of his stepson to unlock the doors when he heard 3 gunshots. He grabbed the boy and realized the boy was bleeding from the right hand. For fear it would take an ambulance too long to get there, the father drove the boy to the hospital. The father told police he does not think he was targeted since he is new to the area. I don't even understand the first words to even think about a child even being shot. Like, that really hurts your heart.
Wrong with what happened in this recent incident? Well, you can start with this question. What is a 13-year-old doing out at midnight?
See, every time you turn on Fox 5, every morning there's another young person that has been killed or has been shot.
We are chronicling with added importance what police are seeing in the street. Officers just after midnight responding to Northwest Atlanta. A 13-year-old boy had been walking on the sidewalk on Joe Boone Boulevard. 2 older teens pass him. Some words are exchanged. Police say moments later, the youngest pulls a weapon from his pants. One of the older kids sees it, draws also, and fires 2 shots, striking the 13-year-old in the left arm and right leg. Police say the shooter and the other older teen flee.
Police are after the crime. We've got to do prevention.
Bruce Griggs, a Metro Juvenile Probation Officer, had already planned to call me unaware there had been another shooting. Along with his day job, you see images of a program called Operation Correct Start Street Academy, designed to pull children away from a cycle of violence.
It's a rites of passage program we call Saving Our Sons.
Our goal is very simple. It's to teach young African American boys how to stay alive and free. If you've got a young man and you see the potential, you see the anger, you see the fear, you've noticed the pain in this young man, this is a program you need to get him in. But there are other programs throughout the city. Make sure you get your child in something.
Griggs says because so many of the boys have no fathers at home, gangs can fill a void.
Black children and black teens only make up 14% of all the American children and teens, but they count for 41% of the children and teen gun deaths.
There was an additional
for anyone who has information that leads to an arrest. Also in Atlanta, police and U.S. Marshals have arrested a man for a deadly double shooting. They arrested James McClendon at a Southwest Atlanta house. Detectives say he shot and killed a man and injured another last month at a house on Lang Street. They've charged McClendon with felony murder. Clayton County Sheriff will not clock into work.
Deputies say one of the victims was shot in the arm, the other in the foot. Both were taken to the hospital for treatment. There's no word on their condition. So far, deputies have not identified a suspect or a motive. Atlanta police are investigating a deadly stabbing. It happened just a couple of hours ago on Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard. Investigators say when they found the victim, he was stabbed and also had several cuts. A person of interest is in custody tonight. Police say they believe an argument led to the stabbing.
South Fulton police are trying to find the person who killed an East Point woman. This is 23-year-old Alexis Lucky. Investigators say they found her early Thursday morning in the middle of the street with a gunshot wound. It was near the intersection of Flat Shoals Road and El Cadillo Court at around 3 a.m. Lucky was taken to the hospital but did not survive. If you have any idea about what happened, call South Fulton Police or Crime Stoppers.
Has the highest dropout.
There was a tremendous amount of gang activity, gang shootings, violence. I was a young African-American male, and the trend in the time in the country is that African-American males were the #1 murder victims in all of the major cities in the country, including Atlanta.
You know, this notion of the city too busy to hate, the notion of Atlanta, the notion of the Black Mecca, you see that it has holes in it.
Atlanta.
If Atlanta wins the Olympic Games, there is a real effort to hide all of the poverty.
I mean, that was a running joke that, if there was a big convention in town, that the streets would be swept and homeless people would be incarcerated. And, there's some truth to that.
Atlanta is really franchising itself for world consumption. And so this is a part of a facelift to not only incarcerate those that have committed crimes, but also the homeless.
Alongside it getting built, on the policy side, the city of Atlanta introduced a whole spate of legislation that criminalized survival activities.
People with suspended license, broken tail lights, all kind of city ordinance stuff. But no one has committed a crime. They violated the city ordinance. And that's the message that a lot of people don't know. They think, oh, where's the criminals going? There are no criminals there. There are people there.
It's not my fault that I'm being arrested for committing a crime. It's somebody else's fault. There's a jail to put me in. It's somebody else's fault that I'm committing a crime.
Structure.
I was in the grocery store and I looked at the price of a 4-pack of generic
great power comes great
store brand
there needs to be
toilet paper
that companies shore up their cybersecurity.
4 rolls.
And the government needs to give them both help, but also impose
almost $3
in order to do that while shoring up the federal government.
Expensive.
We can do both at the same time, and we see how critical that need is.
Chris, I know you've been doing.
You should get it for less than $2.
What does an effective response look like?
Everybody's freaking out about bears in Paulding County. Well, when I was younger and working, I was working in a subdivision in Swanee. Over behind the Ingalls, out there where Falcons training camp is, and I would see bear footprints and deer footprints in the mud where they'd walked across the property we were working on. This is a new subdivision. So that was in Gwinnett County. If you think it's weird in Paulding County, we are the ones that are invading their homes. We've been building out further and further and further over the years. Think about that.
Terrified puppy from a drainage pipe. It started with a panicked call for help from that puppy's owner after this little guy fell into a pipe. He was trapped beneath a concrete slab, so firefighters carefully broke it and carved a hole large enough to pull the puppy out. You can see him there. Thankfully, that little pup is going to be just fine. And caught on camera right here in Cherokee County, a bear hanging out not far from where
doing a whole assessment of the Atlanta Detention Center. I think that, what a difference a year makes, like 100%.
I'm Atlanta City Council member Michael Julian Vaughn. The picture that people lose sight of is when you lock somebody up, there should be consequences. I think on the surface, if you say, you know what, I want to take a place of suffering or perceived suffering and make it into a beautiful place of healing, I don't think you get any disagreement about that. But the devil is in the details.
The taxpayers have spent and invested and paid for that building, and it is perfectly good to use. The symbolism, I believe.
Violent crime has gone way up. Assaults have gone way up. Homicides have gone way up. And they don't think we need a jail. We don't have criminals. We don't. Nobody's criminals, they're people, right? What did they do to get locked up in the first place? They made that choice.